Welcome to the Yang Shao Chuan podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess O'Brien and I discuss internal martial arts, qigong, and meditation. This week we continue our discussion of the Yang family. We're now moving to the fourth generation of the Yang family, to Yang Shao Jung. He was a well-known Tai Chi practitioner in Hong Kong in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So first we do a little bio of him, and then we look at Bruce Frantzis's description of attending his classes. After that, we turn our attention back to the Tai Chi Chuan Lun, the second book of the Tai Chi Chuan classics. In this one, we discuss the concept of dividing into yin and yang, which gets into a pretty detailed discussion about the nature of yin and yang in Tai Chi, and separating and combining and these sorts of things. Just a reminder, this is a shorter version of the episode. If you want the longer extended version as well as a bonus episode, you can go to our Patreon and sign up there. So again, thanks for listening. Thanks for all your support. Take care of yourselves and be well.
Today we're going to continue our look at the Yang family. And so we talked about the first couple generations. And then the most recent generation, at least that we've talked about yet, the sons of Yang Cheng Fu. Yang Cheng Fu, he passed away in the 1930s, but he had a bunch of sons who went on to carry on doing Tai Chi. And one of them was Yang Shao Jung. So let's begin with a little bit of a bio of Yang Shao Jung from the Dragon Tai Chi website. So they start by saying that Yang Shao Jung was the last member of the Yang family to have inherited the family's secret teachings, to have undergone their training, and to have dedicated himself exclusively to the study of Tai Chi. Since him, no one in the Yang family has had access to the family's teaching in their entirety, or committed him or herself exclusively to the martial art. This was partly due to Yang Cheng Fu and Yang Shao Ho's early death, and partly because other family members dedicated themselves mainly to other activities. So these guys make the case that Yang Shao Jung is kind of like the lineage inheritor who has the secrets of the style, and everybody else was too busy with business to learn.
He's the last true, full-time,
Right.
didn't do anything
Right.
but that.
Right. It's his full-time job. So it says he's born in 1920. He followed his father Yang Cheng Fu until his father's death in 1936. So that's when he's 16. His father passed away. At the age of 14, he was already assisting his father. And from then on, he continued to teach professionally until his own death in 1985 in Hong Kong, where he had moved in 1949 and founded his own school. So this bio ends by saying, Yang Shao Jung's Tai Chi differs substantially from the one practiced by others of his father's students. It includes a broader martial repertoire that is not contained in any of the most common schools of Tai Chi, different postural and structural approaches to the form, the tall, medium, and low and wide, medium and narrow, respectively. It has advanced Qigong, strengthening and conditioning techniques, and so on. Yang Shao Jung and his disciples were not content to simply pass on the tradition. They wanted to enrich it and expand it based on their own experience and understanding. So, okay, let's talk a little bit more about Yang Shao Jung. I wanted to pull from Power of Internal Martial Arts and Qi by BK Frantzis. So he describes the scene where Master Yang Shao Jung was teaching in Hong Kong. So it sort of paints a picture of what it was like in Hong Kong in the 70s, which is pretty cool. In 1977, I was given a letter of introduction to Tai Chi Master Yang Shao Jung, who did not accept students without a recommendation. Yang was the eldest son of Yang Cheng Fu, great-grandson of the original Yang Luchan. His school, located in his walk-up flat in the Wan Chai district of Hong Kong, was announced by a sign in beautiful Chinese calligraphy above the second-floor balcony. As in many of the older buildings in Hong Kong, the stairway was particularly dark. So you can just picture walking up the dark stairs to the Hong Kong high rise. So I knocked on Yang's door and gave over the letter of introduction. Once it was read, I was admitted. The flat was small, as were many of those in the older buildings in Hong Kong then. To the right was the family's private living quarters, to the left, the school. A few steps from the door was a small waiting area with a few places to sit. From this vantage, several things could be seen in the apartment. You could observe Yang teaching in the next room, which seemed to be about 250 square feet. Towards the teaching room, above an opening in the wall, you could see pictures of Dong Yingjue and of Yang when he was younger. Dong was one of his father's main disciples who also taught in Hong Kong after the war and spread the teachings throughout Southeast Asia. To the left, next to the front door and against a solid wall, there were usually one or two groups that were practicing push hands. So that paints the picture of the school. It's like inside the family house.
I love it.
Yeah. Sort of like your house.
Kind of like walk in, there's some random dudes pushing hands off to the side.
Right.
Teacher's doing his thing, and,
Right.
Then over there's like the house.
Right. And there's your family doing their homework or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, it's like your place where your practice space is right here in your house.
Yeah, well, that was always my inspiration I got from Frank of like, if you have to walk more than like 20 steps to your job, you're working too hard. So
yeah, you got to come up the stairs to your place too.
I like my commute,
So one more little piece of the picture here that is told in the book. Yang was a northern Chinese, solidly built, relatively tall, and long-limbed for most in Hong Kong, being approximately 5 foot 10 inches tall. He was a warm but very formal man who stood extremely erect. Most of the time I saw him, he usually wore black pants, black gong fu shoes, and a loose-fitting shirt. The atmosphere of the front teaching room was businesslike, bare of furniture. When the teaching room ended, the balcony began. On those days that were hot and extremely humid in Hong Kong, any wind through the balcony window was a welcome relief. Yang taught most of his classes in Cantonese, but he was clearly more natural in his native language of Mandarin, which he spoke with a marked Beijing accent. Yang was pleased that I spoke Mandarin, and often gave me a little extra time, both because I had taken the effort to learn his language, and because of his innate sense of graciousness towards visitors from afar. Yang taught his classes as private lessons, which usually lasted 10 to 15 minutes, with one student before another came into the room. So that's a little sense of what it was like to train in Hong Kong back in the 70s.
Nice.
So another thing that he emphasizes here in the book is he talks about the type of things that Yang Shao Jung would teach when he was doing his form and his push hands training. So he's the first quality he calls up is clarity. There was never anything vague about the way he taught. He was extremely precise about how each of your body parts should be positioned, and he shaped them in each movement of the form. If you missed a detail, he would physically adjust your limbs to ensure that you understood what was expected and what was necessary to maintain quality control. That type of teaching is the best way to teach Chinese martial arts.
I mean, it's really the only way. If you don't if you don't have somebody putting their hands on you, correcting you, it's almost impossible to really get what the thing is about. I mean, you can do the movements, but the actual feeling of what's happening in something is much harder to get if you don't have the physical interaction with someone who can do it. I mean, that's the real advantage of doing push hands with someone who's better than you, is not that you're just going to learn how to do technical stuff, but it's that you start feeling things happening inside of their body, and then you're able to kind of replicate it, after you get shoved a few times. Right. But it's like you sort of get a hint of it, because when you do something to them, things happen, and you're like, oh, that's different.
You just got to feel the overall flow, and that's something about having someone just grab your arms and twist it into the right shape a few times.
It's the most valuable thing.
You got to try to take advantage of that whenever you can.
It's way more valuable than somebody talking to you or telling you how to do it. It's like if they just put you in the position, it's like, yeah, okay, I got it. Like some of the best, corrections I ever got were just when, you'd be holding a posture and, someone come over and just like twist your limb a little bit, or like pull your elbows out from your spine. Just some real lift your neck up. Some little subtle thing, but all of a sudden it's just like everything feels a little lighter or something,
Right. Yeah, and sometimes it's hard for people. Like, it's the teacher can't do it if there's a big class, and I mean it's basically one of the flaws of Chinese martial arts, because it's hard to teach a big group when you've got to twist people into position. It just takes longer.
Well, right. I mean, that's why, classically, I think they would sort of have, two levels, right? You got the public class, which is just the sort of follow along, learn the movements. do a little push hands, get shoved around a bit. Because that weeds out the people that are just there for, the weekend warriors and the hobbyists.
Yeah,
right?
They're working they're warming up to it. They're not quite fully invested yet.
Then, the people that really are invested in it and want to stick around, they kind of move up to a higher level where they're going, in this case, like going to the teacher's house or something.
Right. Those are the guys over there doing push hands in between lessons and just lurking around all the time.
They're doing
trying to do more.
They already know how to do it. They're just there for refinement as opposed to like a beginner
class.
They're
just eager to keep practicing. All right. So another thing that Yang Shao Jung emphasized was a clear 100% zero separation of weight. And that's a controversy in Tai Chi. Some schools maybe only shift 80% forward or whatever, and some, everyone's sort of insistent on.
Yeah, this is one of those things where there's different reasons for doing 100-0 versus 70-30 or 60-40, right? So I think in some cases it's doing what's easiest for people. I think in some cases it's doing it what's matches the application that you like to do, right? I mean, so there's just kind of different.
Yeah, if you modified
the argument that I've heard is that the 60-40 thing was more when people started doing push hands and less weapons and fighting stuff, because in the weapons and the fighting stuff you really need to be able to move your feet. Right, and because if you're, a spear is coming at you, you gotta step to the side. You can't just like sort of roll your weight back.
Right,
it's not enough, right? You have to actually get out of the way of something. So,
just like the Tai Chi Chuan Jing starts out with Tai Chi's agile and light.
There you go.
All right, so and from there he says that the reason why they do it that way, that's the way my great grandfather taught the form.
Fair enough.
There you go.
I mean, you can't argue with that.
Right, there you go. 100.
Why do you do it that way? Because that's the way I was taught how to do it.
Well, it's great-grandfather, like all the way back.
Right.
Like. Okay, then he also liked long stances and wanted younger students to go very low. Get real long, powerful stances.
I mean, there's only one video of him that's available, and it's not good quality, but the one thing you can get from the guy is he's definitely doing pretty low stances, pretty extended stances, and
strengthening the legs.
The incline of the spine is very pronounced, right? So he's doing what they sometimes refer to as the ox plow method of.
So the final thing he calls out here is he talks about Yang Shao Jung liked extended movements where you're stretching away, and he said Master Yang would come and like grab your arm and lightly like lengthen it out at the hand or the arm or elbow or wherever. In that process of drawing it out of your body that we've worked on.
Right. I mean, this is I think there's, sort of two. We talked about folding a bunch, and I think in one of the last episodes, where you have basically lengthening and you have folding, right? And if you think of a rope, right, you can stretch a rope just straight, and and get a tautness in it, right? So it has no slack, but it's not, gonna snap. Or you can take that same rope and you can run it through a bunch of pulleys, right? And this idea that you get, essentially the same amount of tension on both ends of the rope, but one is much further apart and one is closer together.
Sure.
But the rope itself is equally stretched out. So in the small frame stuff, it's the pulley thing. You're stretching, but you're bending and sort of winding it as you stretch it. And in the larger frame stuff, it's a more, at least from the outside, looks more linear, and you're just sort of growing your body. And this is that thing that what he's talking about is mostly about lengthening your fascia. It's not actually your muscles, but there's a thing where when you release that thing very slowly, it gets into your fascia, and this is one of the main reasons why when you do Tai Chi slowly, that's why you're doing it slow, is so you can actually let your body release into the technique rather than pulling on it, right? If you're just pulling on it and stretching it from the outside, your body's going to pull back essentially. it's going to retract when you stop doing it.
If you go slower, might...
Right. If you release that thing, the rope itself gets a little bit longer. It's going to snap back some, but it's going to have a little bit more in it, and then you can, you have more to play with again, so it's this thing of like, you don't want to pull on it too much because it'll snap or it'll,
right.
Break, right?
Yeah.
But you need to pull on it enough that it does its thing. So it's really about getting your elbows away from your spine, not your hand.
Mm-hmm.
So again, in both the small and the larger frames, your elbows are going to be doing that pulling. It's whether or not your forearm is going to be coming towards your body as you pull your elbow away, or it's going to be going forward with your elbow, right? But that initial kind of release and lengthening part, it's what starts to open your body up. And I think that's what Yang Shao Jung was really into it.
Yeah, and I love that idea of, the teacher grabbing your arm and showing you how it could open more to release. Like, that's a hallmark of Chinese martial arts, where the teacher shapes you into being longer, lower, more extended, whatever,
if
making
they
it
don't
harder.
do that, they don't like you. That's kind of the way I see it. I mean, that's sort of like, if your teacher likes you, he'll come over and he'll put your hands on you and he'll lengthen you out. If he doesn't care, he'll just walk by and
Well,
say,
usually be criticizing
good
you
job.
in the process.
Yeah, it's like, if they tell you you're doing it good, you got to question yourself.
You got problems at that point. Now back to the Taiji Chuan Treatise, or Taiji Chuan Lun. So we covered a few of the first and last time. So now we move on to the next quote and Baiwa's explanation. When the body moves, it divides yin and yang. Movement is yang and stillness, yin. So he describes it as thus. So all tangible objects are composed of the basic elements of matter gathered by energy. If the energy is relatively large, the composition of the basic elements will be relatively dense to form a relatively stable, static state. This phenomenon is called fusion. And going beyond that, he says, if energy is lost, the collective composition of the basic elements will relatively dissipate and form a relatively unstable dynamic. This phenomenon is called decomposition. So again, he's describing one thing coming together, fusion, and then the phenomenon of decomposition, coming apart.
Just to keep it sort of in the realm of Tai Chi, right? That idea that when you're, when you go from nothing to something, right? So you're standing there and you're not doing anything.
Wuji posture.
Right? The first thing you have to do is separate the top and bottom, right? So you have to go from 0 to 0 and 1, right? And that's that first, what they sometimes refer to as the commencement, right? Because you start going, up, down, forward, back, right? So you get the first two sets of yin and yang, right? And then you get into, now you've done yin and yang, now you really get into quote unquote Tai Chi, where the yin and yang starts to combine into different things, right? So those first 4 movements of the form are the single, one energy, one movement, right?
So the next section, he brings it down to actual activity here in the regular world. So he says, action and strength must not be overdone or insufficient. You should stick and follow the opponent, take his flexion and extension as my flexion and extension. So that's that idea of kind of borrowing from your opponent. So he describes it thus. Although Tai Chi has several styles, it doesn't matter whether you do the long or the short form. It doesn't matter, what exact shape it follows. And you don't need to worry about like predicting what's going to happen. He says the focus is on the actual distance with the opponent. Empty yourself and then stick and follow the opponent. So that's how you fulfill this thing about not being overdone or insufficient. You've got to empty yourself and stick and follow the opponent. You become balanced and make it difficult for the opponent to exert force. So that's this core dynamic of Tai Chi, is that you balance yourself in order to make it difficult for the other person to put their force onto you.
Right. So the stick and follow thing, that's like that's a common phrase right? The idea that you touch somebody and the way Bruce describes it is it's budu buding, right? Don't push, don't pull.
It can be seen from this point that speed and force are not the decisive factors in the application of Tai Chi Chuan.
Right.
That's his final point.
That's the reason, you're not trying to rely on your hand-eye coordination and your speed. You're something else, right? You've got the stickiness and this other stuff that allows you to sense what's happening on a deeper, more subtle level. And
if the opponent hits with hard strength and I entice it with soft strength, this is called escaping. If I follow the trend and secretly force the opponent into adversity, this is called stickiness. So Baihua begins to describe it like this. In Tai Chi Chuan, escaping is doing the energy of Lu. Lu is escaping. But it is by no means passive letting, fleeing, and so-called avoiding conflicts and then running away. So they're saying Lu is roll back, but it's not running away. The requirement to escape is to actively walk toward the opponent. But since the opponent is relatively rigid and I can't lean on him, I can approach with soft bending. This is the process of my compliance with the opponent's hard, my compliance soft with the opponent's back hard, which is called stickiness.
Right. So that's what I was just talking about with the soft bending, right? The idea that I don't match his force with force. I match, I bend, I fold, right?
And that's how you stick to the person, by absorbing inward a little.
Yeah, and the reverse of that is when they pull away, you don't just like leave your hand where it is or push fast forward. You follow them in. It's kind of like when a boxer throws a punch and someone kind of like, when they pull their hand back, the other person just follows that hand in with the jab. It's like you kind of use their hand coming back to guide yours going forward, right?
So that's how you entice with soft strength.
Right. You're
and then you follow them back and force them.
You're making them think that you don't have any strength. So they push on your arm gives, right? So they think, oh, I got him. And then when they come with that second one and really go for it, you're ready for it and you pull them off balance or whatever.
So it's not just escaping, you're actively luing. So the method of escaping is to stick to him and then do lu. The balance produced by flexion and extension is naturally formed. So like you said, you shove, you roll back, you've created this harmony here. This is the so-called harmony of yin and yang. The opponent takes a hard approach and I merge with softness. The opponent takes a soft approach, I merge with hard. So that's a nice little mention there that doesn't always get noticed.
Yeah, well, that's the flip side of it, right? Like you aren't just doing the soft thing; you're doing both, right? Like,
so if they try to fall back, you Banlan Choi and run up on them and run up parry and punch, and you chase them down.
Yeah, I mean, where you see this a lot, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a really good example. Is they're pulling back, so you kind of do the step forward, boom, parry and punch thing. But it's also just it's a mental thing too, because it's like you can be physically moving backwards and have your mind going into somebody, right? This is something that Shingi does a lot, where you're going backwards, but you're not retreating, right? You're creating space, for the person to fall into, but you're not running away from them, right? And so this isn't when they push on you, you just let your arm collapse against your chest and hope that your back and your legs can stop the push. Because that doesn't help you if that is a knife or something, right? Like you need to be able to not just stop the thing and redirect it, but also get your body out of the way, right? So this idea of like escaping isn't just moving your arm, right, and not getting your arm shoved away. Yeah, it's like really being able to actually escape the person's force, right? So.
And that's why in push hands you do exercises where you freeze somebody in a spot and then they have to figure out where they can shift to kind of deflect your force. And you can spend time figuring out those angles and those escape routes. The final thing he tackles is the concept of taking your opponent's flexion and extension as your own flexion and extension. So he says, only with flexion can I approach my opponent and I stretch and apply Jin to the opponent.
Right. If escaping is your defensive movement, the stickingness is your offensive movement. Right. This is that after you avoid the person's force, right, you follow them back,
and extend and flex,
right, and smack them in the face, right,
and then apply Jin to the opponent nearby.
So how that thing comes out, right, fill in the gap. You can use any Tai Chi technique to do that, but essentially the process of, you got to avoid the way Bruce would always describe this is like a bullfighter, right? The first thing the bullfighter has to do is not get hit by the bull, right? Because if you get hit by the bull, it doesn't matter what happens.
Techniques aren't going to work.
Nothing matters after that, right? So it's like after you get out of the way, then you can apply your technique. But
Reflection in this case.
If you don't have that first one, the second one, and we're the shit. He's saying like when you stretch, you have to keep your head up, relax your neck, right?
Okay, so that's what he's saying. Okay, I think you're right. So what he's saying here is that when you're going to apply this stickiness and force Jin on somebody else, you've got to erect your head and relax your neck. You've got to have connection through all the links of the body. That's that connectedness. And then stickiness, compliance with the opponent. And then the final principle he mentions is following. That is to empty oneself and follow others.
It's controlling the person's spine, essentially, right? So the stickiness is when I push on you and I can get it so that when I push on your arm, your spine moves a little bit, right?
Well, but stickiness before he was talking about compliance, the riding of the person was the stickiness he was
Well, it's the same
about,
thing. I mean,
right?
stickiness going in, though, is you move when I move forward.
I can stick to you offensively.
Yeah, one of the things I do with people is I just show them how like the fascia on your forearm kind of wiggles up and down, goes about an inch if you just grab it and squeeze it and it'll slide. If you just can like connect to someone's fascia, you can push that up into their body because that thing locks. And it's like rather than trying to lock a joint or whatever, you just lock the fascia in their body and you can
slam it.
Because they can't release the tissue, the joint is kind of stuck in place, and that's what this is talking about. Your stretching out is causing them is causing them to kind of constrict and bunch up, and if they're able to kind of unfold internally, they can get out of it. Right, and this is that where it just flips back around. And it's, spy versus
for push hands practice.
Right. Well, that's why push hands is the thing, because it's that sort of spy versus spy, right? Where one side attacks and the other guy sneakily defends, and then he sneakily attacks, and so there's this back and forth, and you're trying to outsmart the other guy the whole time, and
Yeah, that makes sense. And he ends it with following. Empty yourself and follow the other, which is a key Tai Chi principle there, along with all the others.
Well, that's right. That's
completely just empty yourself and let their actions determine your reaction. Pretty much.
You give up your agenda, right? This is the way Bruce would talk about that. That like once you get that opening and you've got them off balance by connecting their spine. You overextended them or crushed them down so they're sort of wobbly. Now you have to be able to take advantage of that opening without, losing your opportunity. So this is like, we talk about gaps a lot. You've made the opening, the gap in the other person, but you don't want a gap and miss it, or, the opportunity is blown. So it's like your ability to continue what you're doing is really the whole thing. Otherwise it's kind of like you blew it. You blew your, you had the opportunity and it's gone, and now
so it can be on either side.
Now you got to start all over again and do the whole thing over, and
to entice them with soft strength, and then follow and secretly force them into adversity.
And this is the thing with push hands, is basically that's what you're doing. Is it's like you're going to constantly fuck up reset, maybe get them, maybe not, reset, they push on you, you maybe get out of the way, maybe not, right?
Reset.
And it's just constantly having to address that thing of like, oh, what I did either worked and I have to change from that, or it didn't work and I got to change from that. Like, those are your only two options, right? It's like, so keeps the ball rolling.
Sun just came out in San Francisco.
All right.
All right, let's do it again.
All right, man. Talk soon. Hey, folks. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode there. Just a reminder, for the extended episode and bonus episodes, go to our Patreon. $5 a month gets you the basic level, which gives you the current stuff. And for $10 a month, you get the entire archive and all the interviews and everything else. All right, don't forget to check out the Instagram for images to go along with the episodes, and take care of yourselves. Be well.